Folks, that was an extraordinary presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and got a chance to meet some of the people who have been in the headlines wrongfully convicted and whose lives were turned upside down by injustice. Robert Foxworth, James Watson, Sean Ellis, wrongfully convicted. One of the statistics at the very beginning summed it up very well. When on the screen you saw 2,883 exonerations since 1989, or in other words, 25,600 years behind bars, not just for the people behind bars, but for their families. It's extraordinary. And I think I'd like to ask you, Robert, you, James, Sean, this question. How would you sum up your lives at this point? Starting with you, Robert. It's a loaded question.
I feel like my life's been taken and given back. I feel like there's a 30-year gap in between that I'm lost on. When you're a baby and you're born, you're taught everything as an adult. So as you go on in life, you learn to do things in life by yourself. When you're taken out of life, no matter how old you was, I was 23 for 30 years, then put back in society, I'm lost again. I'm a baby out here and people are trying to help me cope with society. It's, to put it in a few words, I lost my life, regained my life. Now I'm trying to find my life.
James? James, take it off of mood. You're on, okay, there you go.
They took mine. I was 20 years old. They left me with nothing to say. They took it. It took 40 years from me. Maybe 41 years. They left me with shit to talk about. Well, not talk about, but my life. They took it. My son is now 43 years old. Yeah. They shattered his life forever. Forever. Can't get that back. 10 years are gone.
No, we can't, Pop.
He's still going through hell today. And probably because of
well, you know what? I'm happy to have you now, Pop.
I know. I'm staying here, son. Love you too, man. Yeah. It's gone. Yeah. We can never give it back.
Sean.
I remember when I was incarcerated, I remember there being 3 different realities for me. I remember there being a survival reality. I remember there being a existing reality, and then like I remember a reality where I was free. You know what I mean? And the survival reality was growing up as a young Black man in the city, particularly at the height of the crack era. And that was survival for me. Even though I was a medical student going to school in Needham and having that, you know, when I came back to my community, it was about survival. Existent is like when I was in prison, I existed, but I wasn't living. It's like, because you're in there and you're under somebody else's rule and authority and all that. It's like, if you need toilet paper, you got to go and ask the CO for toilet paper, and they can just tell you no, just because they want to. They can have a whole box of toilet paper in the back and just tell you no. So when you ask me to like sum up life, I can't sum up life. I can sum up existing. I can sum up reality, surviving, but I can't sum up life because I've just started living when I started to kind of work on the traumas and everything that I experienced as a result of the hell that I was put through as a result of the criminal legal system. So that's how I answer your question.
You know, when collectively, you guys have spent an extraordinary amount of years behind bars, and the survival that you talk about, Sean, is precisely what it is. It's surviving. It's getting to this point. When you guys went into prison, there was no, you didn't have cell phones the way you, Sean, they were coming out at that point, what we know now as cell phones. But there was what we now know as Facebook, what we now know as social media. All those things were, and certainly in James's life, those things were, did not exist. Also, what did not exist was an Innocence Project. Also, what did not exist was the use of DNA in order to determine innocence. Also, what did not exist was a harder scrutiny of eyewitness testimony, of the type of thing that we see now, which is absolutely problematic, was considered fine and part of the law and order of that point. So one of the things I would like to talk about is one of the common denominators for your lives. And one of those common denominators, of course, is the Innocence Project. Can you talk about how the Innocence Project came into your life and how you would like to see it expand to those you know behind bars who should not be there in your view, and from what you've known and the conversations you've had with fellow inmates? Starting with you, James.
Well, I had a conversation with quite a few that I know should not be there. I talked to one tonight that should not be there. I mean, and you know, Joseph Pope, I want to know his name, Joseph Jabez Pope, Lord Hamilton. Guy shouldn't be there. But they invest all this power in law enforcement and police. You know, everybody's in there that I've talked to, few that I know that I talked to, who say they're innocent. We sat down, we went over and over again. Walking to Westfield, Eastfield, screaming, we're innocent. And the Innocent Project. Angels. God-given angels. Barbara Monroe, angel. Maddie Blanchard, angel. John Nazi, angel. Jill, angel. Sorry, Jill, forgot your last name. Angels. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't even have a life. That would have been my box. They wanted to kill me by accusing me of killing somebody else. Made me a poster child for a goddamn death penalty. Lied to me, lied to Bohanzans. I want to tell them so bad, the family, that these people are lying to you. But I know that wasn't going to happen. Well, I thought it wasn't. But then came the angels.
Well, James, among those angels, in the view of many, certainly Sean and Robert and others, is something that also did not exist when you were convicted, the notion of a progressive district attorney. And we have that progressive district attorney right now here on the line with us, Rachel Rollins. Rachel, good evening.
Good evening, Philip. Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Rachel, could you comment and let's start a conversation of what you have in common and what these gentlemen have in common are the decision by your office under your jurisdiction to not to proceed with retrying these individuals, given that you determined that they were wrongfully convicted, that there were problematic aspects of the case, of their cases throughout, including the, for example, Robert's instance, eyewitness testimony that was extraordinarily problematic. Can you comment or just engage these gentlemen in the role that you played and your office played in them being here now?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, they had exceptional lawyers that worked really hard to succinctly explain the problem. I do think, candidly, that many of the people in my role weren't interested in listening. We have a criminal legal system that is more interested in finality than they are in justice. And when I realized that I was just going to be comfortable enough in my skin to say, if this pleading has my name on it, I'm not going to sign anything or allow anything to be filed that I believe might be legally right, but is absolutely morally wrong. So with Radha, with Lisa Kavanaugh, with other people that have pushed really hard, as well as they should, to advocate for the wrongdoings that had occurred and to force people sitting in my seat to actually listen and to see the humanity in people and to determine that if something went wrong, are we going to do everything in our power to try to uphold that conviction? So when we talk about conviction integrity, is it more about the conviction or is it more about the integrity? And I'll tell you, in my administration, it's about the integrity. And I will not put my name on anything that I believe was secured illegally, unconstitutionally, unethically, or unjustly. And I will finish with one of the first things I did as a DA was sit down with another exoneree that I did not have the privilege of being involved in his case, but Fred Clay, I think I saw him here. We sat down together and had a conversation after the movie Just Mercy, which we were able to secure some funding to see that movie for neighborhood school children. And then I was able to offer an apology, even though I was not the DA that prosecuted Mr. Clay, thank goodness, but I am the DA that was able to write him a letter of apology. And he said, thank you for that, but you need to look into James Watson. And that's the type of person Fred Clay is. And I believe, Fred, I don't know whether you verbally told me that or you also wrote me a letter, or you told me and you wrote me a letter. But we absolutely did look into Mr. Watson, and we absolutely did look into Mr. Foxworth. And we absolutely did, I see you there, look into Mr. Ellis. And I have no problem standing up when I know something is right. But I also want to acknowledge there are families on this call that have lost a loved one to homicide. And although it was not Mr. Watson that committed that homicide necessarily, of course, the hole and the hurt is still there. And so what I try to do is not only make sure we say when we're wrong, but have those real conversations with the families that still are hurting from the homicide or the murder that occurred, irrespective of who was responsible. When we make decisions that are hard, I want to have those conversations. So that's what I would say, Philip.
Rachel, thank you. James, Sean, Robert, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask Rachel questions or to comment if you like.
Well, I just want to thank her for the time and the effort that her and her integrity unit put into my case and every other case. You know, we haven't, I haven't been I don't feel given a fair trial by the former prosecutors, Conley and Martin's office. I think they were just rubber stamping everything and sending whoever came before them to jail. I think for the first time, we got someone that's willing to put their foot down and say, basically, not in my name. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for that, Ms. Rollins.
Thank you, Mr. Foxworth.
Thank you the same. And I really appreciate it. And Freddie, thank you.
He was, James, he was fighting for you. I promise you that.
I know he was. I know he was. But
go on, Sean. I'm sorry.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Rachel. And so I kind of come from a different perspective. And first I want to say thank you to Rachel for having the moral compass that she has just as an individual, not even a district attorney, because before you become a district attorney, you have to be an individual. And so having the moral compass as an individual, stepping into whatever job role that a person has is extremely important. So I just want to say thank you for her for having the moral compass that she has. But it's when we speak about the criminal legal system, right? The criminal legal system should not work based on your area code or based on your network or based on who you know. The criminal legal system should work based on the laws and the policies that are in order. And I remember in 1994, my attorneys made a request for exculpatory evidence in 1994, right? That was denied by a judge, that was fought against the DA's office, so on and so forth, right? And long story short, I'll get to it because we're on a time frame, right? When somebody can look at rulings that was had, when someone can look at the law that's in place and see that it's wrong, that it's erroneous, right? And then have the moral compass to kind of stand on the side of justice and not finality, that's really a mark of what's going to get back, what's going to get this criminal legal system back on track. It can't just be about the conviction, because a lot of these convictions, but particularly convictions that's based on like what transpired between the early to mid 80s and the early to mid 90s, when there was issues of police corruption and so on and so forth within our communities, that was basically, to be frank, allowed to happen under, as we've seen in trial for Newman Flanagan and the people that came up in that time frame. My point is that when you come into your office being true and authentic to who you are as people, right? That shouldn't be the mark of what justice is. Justice is justice, and as a society, we all come up with thoughts, feelings, rules, regulations, and so on and so forth as far as the laws and how they develop and how they come into existence. The law is the law, and you got to go by the law. And period. Bottom line, like we should be fair in how we administer law, and we have not been fair in how we administer law. If we've been fair, then I would not be on this call. Jane Watson would not be on this call. Robert Foxworth would not be on the call. You would not have people like Stephen Pena still incarcerated. You would not have people like Quincy Butler with several issues going on in his case. There has to be a moral compass that really guides the administration of law and what happens.
I think one of the things. Oh, go on, Rachel. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, Phil. What I would like to say back, Philip, is just what I want to bring to this job is a respect of the community. And I had a meeting today with the mother of a young man who lost his life in an encounter with law enforcement. He was killed by a police officer, and a previous administration found that shooting justified and reasonable. But what I realized as I met with that woman is that no one had ever sat down with her and explained the process, right? No one, hi, beautiful. Can you give me 1 sec? Thank you. My 8-year-old niece, Victoria, is going to be making a lot of noise around here, guys. So apologies early. So what's interesting is I said, you might not be happy with the outcome, or you may be happy with the outcome. But what I promise you is that I will respect you enough to answer your questions truthfully, to get you the documents that you should have been given 9 years ago, right? And to explain the process as to what's happening. And I think there's just a lack of urgency, right? And remember, we have to do it right, because I said, even with Mr. Ellis's case, Trial 4 is a great docuseries. It's not evidence. So why it took so long, and believe me, Rose Scarpicchio is an excellent lawyer, and she wrote a great motion for a new trial. But if I'm putting my neck out there, I can't say, well, you saw episode 3 of Trial 4. That's not evidence. I had to make sure that we pulled all of the files on the 3 other trials from storage. I had to get, U.S. attorney's documents. We had to get internal affairs, anti-corruption. I wanted to make sure that I could stand with my shoulders back and my feet squarely in place to say absolutely not. I assent to this motion for new trial because this was infected from the beginning to the end with corruption. And we have to have a moment where we no longer force defendants to have to scramble when we have corruption, when we have hypnotized witnesses, it is outrageous, some of the things, when we have policies from the person that used to sit in my desk at my seat of challenging every Black juror in cross-racial homicides. That's Arnie King, right? So we are going to move really hard. I wish we could do it quicker, but just understand the time that we take is because if I'm going to oppose, I want to make sure I can stare in somebody's face and answer those questions, because I understand this is a matter, honestly, we don't have the death penalty, but it is a matter of life and death, the decisions we're making. That's why I take it, Miss Victoria, please hush. I'm sorry. I wish that I take it very, very seriously, and I demand that my staff do as well.
One of the things that Rachel, in our panel, we always think we're always moving forward. And I certainly, that's my frame, that we're always moving forward. We have an Innocence project. We have a progressive, district attorney. We have people being exonerated who have been wrongfully convicted. Well, you also have a movement in the country right now to, if you will, turn things around, to make things go backwards. Some folks envision the 1950s as an ideal time. Very few of us would. And so I'm wondering how do you see this movement to exonerate those who are wrongfully convicted? How do you see it moving forward or possibly backwards? Rachel, your own situation, where you have members of the U.S. Senate basically militating against your candidacy. Can we continue to move forward with this village, if you will, as Sean described it in his speech that we saw in the film moments ago?
Yeah, somebody just asked the question in the chat: who takes responsibility for what happened to these men? And there are women too, right? There are women as well, maybe not on this call, that have been wrongfully convicted. But part of what I think the most important step is even though I might not have been the person that made the decision originally, I sit in the seat right now. And I think the most important thing was, whether it meant anything to Mr. Clay or not, whether it meant anything to Mr. Foxworth or not, whether it meant anything to Mr. Watson or not, but to apologize. And then not just do that, but when they do have the letter that has to go to the Attorney General's office, right? To make sure that they, if we have filed something believing that there were errors made that we are responsible for. And as the chief law enforcement officer, they don't report to me necessarily, but mistakes of law enforcement of any kind fall on my lap. What are we doing more than just lip service, right? It does nothing, and I've been clear about this, to file a null pros, but then have a press conference that vilifies the person and says they're still guilty of the crime that we filed a null pros on, right? Like this doesn't even require a law degree. This is just like good sportswomanship or good sportsmanship, or understanding that there is decency and compassion that is necessary. And my hope, Phillip, is that we are moving forward, right? There is not another profession or a single profession in the world where there's a 0% error rate. There's not a single one. Doctors, some of the best doctors in the world, some of their patients still die, and they are considered still excellent doctors. There is some misconception in law enforcement, which I am part of, that loves to believe that we never make mistakes, or that if we admit we make mistakes, what do they always say? The floodgates will open. If we admit that, look, we lose credibility when we stand behind corruption, unconstitutional, and unethical behavior. We lose credibility. And remember, James Watson, Sean Ellis, Robert Foxworth, Fred Clay, they are loved. They have family members. They have neighbors and relatives that are all potential jurors. They're all potential grand jurors. They're all potential trial jurors. And if I don't have the credibility to stand up and say, we made a mistake here, we're sorry, and we're going to do everything in our power to correct it, the system fails. Because remember, the cases that I'm presenting to the grand jury are actually cases I want to move forward on, because I think we do have the right person that committed that crime, and I want to get accountability for a family, right? And if they don't trust the police, I'm not going to get a true bill in that, or I'm not going to get a guilty verdict, right? So it's confusing, but it is all connected. And if we are disingenuous or clinging to what is legally right and morally wrong, or even legally wrong, but just don't want to undo a conviction, we're never going to make progress.
Okay, I'm going to, Rachel, thank you. I'm going to turn to our audience. A lot of folks have a lot of questions, and want to acknowledge some people in the audience. Elaine Murphy, for example. Hello, and John Nardizzi. Let me just scroll up here for a second. Let's start with, I'm going to come back to John's question, but I'm going to start with Lisa's. What can community members do to support the kind of cultural change within the Boston Police Department that needs to happen in order to prevent future wrongful convictions and to enable meaningful re-examinations of past wrongs? I think, Rachel, we can direct that to you, but we can also direct it to our panel, because in terms of their frame, their view. I'm going to repeat that question, if you can see it. What can community members do to support the kind of cultural change within the Boston Police Department that needs to happen in order to prevent future wrongful convictions and to enable meaningful re-examination of past wrongs? Who would like to start?
I'll start with that one. I'll give Rachel a break. But so there's a couple of things that can happen in order to kind of address the issue of wrongful convictions. One is, as we've seen manifest through Rashawn Hall and the NAACP, what a difference a DA makes. When you get involved with a district attorney election, you're getting involved with an election of someone who's going to go in there that has a whole lot of authority to make a decision on if a case goes forward or if it doesn't go forward. And what I've experienced, and what many people that look like me experience, is that oftentimes we've gone into a courtroom and we've stood as defendants against a prosecutor that doesn't look like us, that doesn't have the experiences and the encounters with law enforcement that many people in the Black and brown communities have. And so when that dynamic is offered into the courtroom, right, is looked upon as far-fetched. Like, this does not happen, right? And that's not to say that, you know, all police officers are bad. That's not to say that all police officers approach their job from a racial premise. It's not to say that at all. But when you walk out your door and you the first thing you see is somebody being roughed up or profiled by police officers in the community, by someone who doesn't look like them, that's an experience that you bring with you to your job, meaning you know that this happens now. Whereas in a more affluent communities such as Needham or Wellesley or Lexington, when you walk outside your door, you don't see this happening. So you are more apt or more likely to disbelieve that this sort of behavior happens because you don't see it. You haven't witnessed it. You know what I mean?
So Sean, let me ask this question for our other panelists. What role does race play in this? What role do you think race played in your conviction, James Watson?
Sorry,
John.
Who are you talking, Sean, to me?
Talking to you.
It played a big role. It played a big role in it. I know it did. Because I was not supposed to even make it to trial. I wasn't supposed to make it out of the police station. The only reason why I did, because they became cowards. They wouldn't pull the trigger. I wouldn't go for the gun in the barrel. That's how I made it out of the police station. And my family was outside the door of their office. And they cowered out. But then when I was at a trial, they brought the death penalty. It wasn't active. They were trying to revive it. They still made me the poster child. But they knew before they put the fucking cuffs on me, I wasn't the guy. They knew. They did it anyway. They did it anyway. They did it anyway.
Robert?
Well, to me, yeah, I'm not gonna, in my situation, or not in every situation, I'm not gonna say race plays a card, but I am gonna say, you know, if you grab someone and you charge someone with anything, prosecute them under your laws and your statutes presiding to the state. Don't hold evidence, commit Brady violations, and you know, it's supposed to be a fair trial. Meaning, you give me everything, we'll go against you, and we'll just see where the jury plays. Juries are the fact finders, and they determine who's innocent, who's guilty. In a lot of cases, defendants are not given that. You know, in my situation, a guy said he sees someone with curly hair in the tail do the shooting. I'm the only picture they put in the armory with curly hair in the tail, and they made the identification process take place at the victim's house in their living room. Didn't go to the police station. They went to the victim's house, and the victim's family members were there, and the police told him it was me that did it, and he went with that. You know, if you're gonna do anything as far as trying cases and hearing cases and all that, I'm saying just give a defendant a fair trial. And if people want to know what they can do to help, well, if they take donations or whatever they take that could help the Innocence Project further, bring more people on board to help get the other guys out, then that's a course right there that guys can take. It's a course that females can take. It's a course that everyone can take. I mean, it's about justice, and everyone's not getting justice. You know, I sat many times in my cell looking up out that window at that sky, looking at the stars, didn't know when this was going to come. I said, you know what, they're willing to let us die. They're willing to let me die in there. So I don't take nothing for granted no more. And I think the Innocence Project, I think John and Linda Thompson and Amy Belga, and I think Rachel Rollins, Dara, and David and everybody here played a role in that, man. I mean, there's more guys sitting in there, man, and more families on the outskirts with tears everywhere. So, you know, if someone can help. If you can donate and give to get more people to help, then that's a route too. There's a whole lot of routes that people can take, but it's about taking action.
Speaking of action, Rachel, this question from John, you've probably seen it on the screen already. Will the DA's office consider filing a bar complaint against the prosecutor, Tim O'Neill, in the Fred Clay and James Watson case, pointing out that he still has his bar license? I'm not sure if that's something you can comment on or not.
I hadn't considered that, but anyone can file a complaint against somebody, but that is something that absolutely, hearing that, I will look into that for sure. I want to piggyback on something that Mr. Ellis said. So in many cases, the arresting officer, the booking officer, the corrections officer, the prosecutor, the CPCS, criminal defense attorney, the probation officer, the clerk, and the judge, none of them look like the defendant. None of them are people of color, right? And when I say people of color, and I'm talking about some of the violent, serious crimes, overwhelmingly, I mean Black and brown people. And so on our Superior Court in Massachusetts right now, there are over 80 judges across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on our Superior Courts. I only deal with Suffolk Superior Court, where there's one Superior Court. Of all of those judges, two are Black. There used to be 3. One of my colleagues, Angel Kelly, just went over to become what's called an Article 3 judge. So she's going to be a judge in the Moakley courthouse. So that's number 1. Number 2, the person who said, I think it was Mr. Ellis again, a lot of people don't believe some of the things that people of color deal with when they're stopped by law enforcement. So when we shut our eyes and say somebody lost their life because they had an air freshener that was blocking the rear view mirror of their car, that's what they were pulled over for. There's a lot of people of means of every color that might say, oh, that's ridiculous. It had to be something else. No, right? Like, no. And so although that did not happen here in Boston, what we're dealing with that we see in every prosecutor's office is the concept or the misconception of a fair trial or equal access to sort of liberty, right? Like I have family members, I live in Roxbury. I have family members on my dad's side, Irish family in West Roxbury. They are terrible drivers. I love my Uncle Paul, but he's like 108 years old and he's a menace to society driving on the streets. He's not pulled over every day driving down LaGrange Street in his car, you know, with his glasses on going over the median line, right? But on Humboldt Ave or Waybon Street or Warren, you know, or Blue Hill Ave, we have traffic stops that are very frequently happening to people of color at a significantly higher rate. I'm not talking about after a shot spotter activation. I'm not talking about the culprit that just robbed the store has a high bun and wears like horn-rimmed glasses and I drive by and they stop me. I'm not talking about that. I'm just routine stops. So what we have to do is stop being uncomfortable talking about wealth and race-based disparities. And we need members of law enforcement and members of government that actually reflect the community that we're supposed to serve. So we have to be better. And then, you know, even myself included, we have to not be defensive when excellent lawyers like Radha and Lisa and others tell us, you got it wrong, you're wrong, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. And there are some times where I'm like, oh my God, can anyone just be happy? But you know what? No, they can't. Because at the end of the day, when I look at a Mr. Foxworth, or I look at a Mr. Ellis, or I look at a Mr. Watson, or I look at a Mr. Clay, and I know that my slight agitation because people are telling me I haven't done what I promised doesn't even compare to one night they spent at MCI Norfolk or one of our other carceral facilities where they prayed. And it brings me almost to tears to look at these faces, to know that each of these men believed they were going to die behind bars. And each of these men is now hopefully in a place where they feel safe and loved and cared for and healthy, and that they have opportunity in their lives. And that's why I ran for this office. Because as all of you know, who your DA is in some communities is more important than who the president of the United States is, who the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is. And by the way, we need more movement on pardons and commutations, but that's a different story. who the mayor of Boston is, and I hope all of you are voting if you're in Boston, right? Who your city councilor is, your Congress, members of Congress, your DA impacts if you are the survivor of homicide or if you've been charged with a homicide or a violent crime. If you don't feel like you even have a shot in the system, it's devastating. It's devastating.
I'm sorry, Sean. Go on, Sean. But after this, Sean, we'll head over to Quaverly. Go ahead, Sean.
Quick. I'll be very quick, right? And I have to give DA Rollins like a lot of credit for being here, right? Because there are other counties in Massachusetts, right, who have conviction integrity units, right? That's not doing no work. It's when you have a conviction integrity unit, right? It's not about really the conviction. It's really about the integrity of it. And in other counties, what I'm hearing and experiencing as a result of communicating with people who are still incarcerated, right? The conviction integrity units in these other counties are dealing with the conviction and just looking at finality rather than looking at the integrity of the conviction. And so when I'll sum up with this, right? By saying when you have a conviction integrity unit, it has to be geared towards the quest of justice and not finality. And that's something that I think that Suffolk County is kind of at the forefront of, right? Is the quest for justice rather than finality of a conviction. Because when you look at finality of a conviction, if that's what you're looking at and only what you're looking at, the conduct and behavior, the actions of Detective Sarah Walters Robinson and Brazel would not have ever come to the forefront. It would never have been something that's addressed. But when you're looking at the integrity of something, right, you're looking at the basis of it. You're looking at how did this come about? And that's something that other counties and the state is not doing. And so that's something that all those who are present have to be mindful of. They have to be mindful of the district attorney's elections in those counties so that we can put somebody in office that's progressive in those counties so that we can start to really administer justice for those who there are people still currently in prison for crimes that they did not commit. And it's gonna take the people that's on this call to elect somebody that's as progressive as DAs in Suffolk County and those DAs across the country, as far as from Maryland and Philadelphia, because DA Rollins is not by herself. DA Rollins is just in a class of people who's kind of stepping up and trying to administer justice from a just standpoint. So I'll stop at that.
Okay, well stated, Sean. Thank you. Quaverly, you're on.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm a court reporter. I make the official transcripts for the superior courts mostly, and also in the juvenile courts for the DCF permanent removals, permanent, separation of children from their parents. And I just want to point that out for all the people that are here and lift that up as a cause to be aware of, because it's a different kind of life sentence, but it's out there and it's happening every day, that good parents who are poor and vulnerable are having their children taken from them for life. That's a life sentence. They don't even have the right to know who adopts them in the end. It's a total termination of your rights as a parent. And if any one of us with privilege was targeted in the way that these families are and was scrutinized the way that they are, we would not pass the test either. And our children will be taken too. And I just want you to know that, because those cases are sealed. And so the public doesn't get to hear them to protect the rights of the minor. And I'm sticking my neck out tonight because I have a duty to be impartial. But I heard someone say this week, impartiality is a cop-out. That means that you think that your privilege, protecting your job security and all of that, is more important than equity and justice. So I don't know what the bounds are of my impartiality. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and not say. There aren't really laws about it. But from a moral compass standpoint, please lift up awareness about DCF and child removals, because they're just as wrongful, they're just as permanent, and they're heartbreaking. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Waverly. That's without question, everyone appreciates that you, as you said, spoke up and indeed stuck your neck out on this issue. I'm going to go to Don, and then I have a couple more questions myself. Don, you have your hand up.
Yes. Being an urban kid and coming from Roxbury, Massachusetts, growing up and not having my father with me, I can say losing my brother at the age of 15, I was 15, he got murdered. He was 17. And to see firsthand at corrupted police where I come from, where the Child Stewart case took place, where I had a family member playing cards at a table and they run in and grabbed every African-American in Mission Hill projects because they looked like this one description that a man gave. His word was more powerful than anything in our, because we was poverty, I guess. You know, we was nothing. And like I say to you, to see all that happen and still sustain 43 years old with no criminal record because of a deal I made with my father, he taught me how to keep my word even though he was stuck behind bars. That right there is my best friend. And that right there, if he was present in my life as I was growing up, you said, how can the community help? I feel like the core values of our justice system is so poor. It's no longer protect and serve. It's intimidate and bully to the point where it comes to how can our community stand up and speak where they're being threatened. And as the young lady who just spoke about DHS, I'm a product of that. I've been in the system all my life. I'm the one that broke that cycle from my family. I'm one of 8. My brothers and sisters have been taken. One more time, we was permanent. So I made a decision at the age of 16 to be the father figure until my mother came right with herself. It took a year and some months, but I did it. But things like that, I could have did stronger if I had my father. But I couldn't trust anybody because we couldn't understand if we did stand together, what would happen to us when nightfall. People don't understand. It ain't what happened in the daytime, 9 to 5, is what happened 5 to 9. And that was the hard part to get through with people that are supposed to have the badge to protect us, but we can't trust them. So it need to be a better bridge of communication and be shown with their actions as well as their words that they can be trusted, where they will be heard and they will be safe to be able to say what's truth and what's justice.
Don, thank you. It's powerful. Don is James Watson's son, by the way, if folks don't know. And yeah, that was powerful. Just wanted to ask everyone to sum up, and also wondering, I guess I have 2 questions in thinking about your summary about the ones who actually did it, who got away with it because you were behind bars and no one was pursuing the real killers. Your thoughts on those left behind, those victims. Also, your thoughts on the way Americans think about law and order. Quite often they think about it like this TV show itself, Law and Order. What do they get wrong? Especially when you reflect on those years behind bars, what do they get wrong about the cultural paradigm of law and order? James?
I do believe it's law and order. You know what I mean? I just can't fault the world. If I did that, I'd just be as bad as them. And my father told me something. He said, don't change. If you're a good person inside, stay that way. Don't let nobody change you. And they didn't. I didn't let nobody change me. I could have came out a monster, but I didn't. God didn't let them change me. I wasn't a monster going in. I wasn't going to be a monster coming out. I ain't going to say I ain't thought about it, but my father was up in here saying, and I don't understand who, you know, I know I'm a victim. The Bohans is a victim. I mean, nobody, I don't know if anybody ever went to the Bohans and told them, you know what I mean? We're sorry. Your case is now a cold case. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I'm not blaming Rachel. I'm not blaming you, Rachel. But it's a cold case. And since so much time has been passed, they'll probably never find the perpetrators who lived their life as a free individual or whatever. You know what I mean? We'll never find them. You know what I mean? Because me and Freddie suffered for them. You know, we suffered for them. You know what I mean? And my son, yes, as he expressed, he suffered a great deal. But who goes to them and tell them, you know what I mean, we're sorry, you know what I mean, your case will never be solved. But at the beginning was telling them, it's okay, we got him, you're all right, you're safe again. You know, bunch of bull. It's a bunch of bull. And I'd like to thank you, Bohanjan. Thank you for everything. Rada, Lisa Kavanaugh, it's right out here. You can see you. I'm half blind. You know? And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. My worst fear of all, when is it going to happen again? To me, Robert, Sean. We can't sit back here and say it won't, because it should have never happened in the first place.
Robert?
Law and order. Well, probably works sometimes. Sometimes it don't. And when it doesn't, it's a long fall. It's, I mean, I sat in prison for a long time, and seems like I went up, and 1993 federal authorities came forward with information that actually cleared me and had the actual culprits on it, and they turned it over to either Ralph Martin or Connolly's office. It was ignored, so I still sat. You can sit in there every day, and it's, I can't even explain it. It's too traumatizing. It's like we are mentally damaged for life. I mean, we moving on, we're trying to cope and trying to understand, but the first step you're trying to do when you're in that situation is get out. And when you get out, you're like, okay, I made it past that barrier, but you don't understand how damaged you are. You're damaged inside and out, and you don't know it. People see you and be like, oh, nothing happened to him. It's been 30 years. He's still the same person. No, I'm damaged. I know that much. You know, I don't have all 4 grandparents. I lost all 4 uncles, all 4 aunts. I lost my son, and I lost my mother. So I literally came home empty inside, but I came home, and what family I did have was here. So like, I don't understand a lot of the justice system. You put me there and you took care of me for 30 years. You gave me everything, medical, dental. You gave me clothing, you gave me food, you gave me everything. Then you determine you made a mistake and put me wrongfully. I've been out 10 months and they giving me nothing but food stamps. They giving me nothing else. I mean, you said you put me there wrongfully and you let me out in worse. If I didn't have family, I'd be in a worse position than I was when you put me in. So I don't understand. There's really nothing. I mean, you will compensate me. Sure, I don't know. I know up until this point right now, I was giving an apology, and I appreciate that lady for that. That was big. But it's state of Mass. You need to implement a statute or rule or something that, you just can't say to somebody, we're sorry we put you there wrongfully. Okay, now go back on the street and deal with it. If I didn't have no family, I would have been staying in Pine Street with nothing, waiting on a meal a day or a bed, because they put me there wrongfully. So I don't know which end is the torture. Was it going to jail or getting out? I don't know. So I'm trying to figure that part out. But as far as justice, because of the Innocent Project, because of John and Linda Thompson, because of Amy Belger, and because of Miss Rollins, Dara and David and them, I was given justice. So I got to learn to move on in life, mentally damaged and all, and I will. So I'm hopefully going to start college soon, I'm working already, so I'm trying to move on. I'm trying to put the puzzle together. There's a lot of pieces I can't find, but we'll put what we got together and we'll deal with it from there. Thank you.
Robert, thank you. Sean, law and order.
Law and order, Phil. So I'll start with this, man, because Robert just hit a nerve for me. I lost my father when I was in prison. One of my two only parents. That's our behalf. That made me. And I could not go and pay my final respects to my father. But I could stand in the court at Norfolk and observe a moment of silence for Sandy Hook. And it was legitimate. It was appropriate. But I couldn't go and pay my final respects to my father. I couldn't say, Dad, I'll see you in the next life. And so when we speak about us coming home, I've been home going on 6 years, and I've had places to stay. I'm homeless. At this time right now, I'm homeless. And I have a cousin who, allows me to stay with her and all, but I have no home. And so this is the part of wrongful conviction stuff that people don't see. People see us coming home and so on, but they don't see this part. They don't see the part where I've been trying to connect with a therapist, right? And can't connect with a therapist. And I did, and it's well, nah, I need maybe a trauma specialist, because I done gone through some stuff as a result of the system feeling, not just me, but us as a community, feeling the exoneree community. And that's why I've done work to help to co-found the Exoneree Network, because it's the realization that, hold on, this part of this that we're falling, but there's some cracks here, and we're falling between the cracks, and we're not able to get the help that's needed in order to help get us on track. But you asked about law and order. I want to say this, right? When we speak about law and order, we always have to keep in mind, and we're moving forward, right? But we always have to keep in mind that the police derived out of slave catchers, okay? And when we speak about slavery, we speak about economics, okay? So when there's people coming from the Black and brown community that goes and they're incarcerated, and we do census, we do the census, and then money are taken from the communities that we come from, and they're put into the communities that house us and imprison us wrongfully. That money is coming away from our community, going to these suburban communities, because there's no prisons in Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan, although there's South Bay. But you have Susan Baranowski, you have Concord, I can count them. And it's probably going to take more than both of my hands to count how many prisons are in suburban communities where the money's going to the suburban communities as a result of these Black and brown bodies coming from the community. And so when you speak about law and order, there is no distinction between slavery to me and economics. And slavery is economics. And until we begin to address the moral compass we spoke about, until we begin to address equity economically, and until we really have a real hard conversation about slavery and what, like, how that affects the two communities, because it doesn't just affect the Black and brown community, it also affects the white community as well. Until we begin to have these conversations and figure out how we can join up and address the issues of the criminal legal system, this is just gonna continue. It's just gonna go on. And I'll say this, that we have the power to stop the system and say, hold on, you're not gonna continue to prosecute and wrongfully incarcerate people in my name, right? Because Volvo, Volkswagen, Mercedes, no matter what manufacturing company does it, right? If you make a car and that car is faulty, and you recognize there's a problem in the manufacturing system, right? You stop production and you address the problem. But we don't do that within the criminal law system. And we have to, we need to. And it's gonna take the people who attended this event to say, listen, enough is enough. We're going to the war room, because it's gonna be a war. It's just not gonna be, well, you know, we want the system to be fair. There's gonna take place, just like life without parole. You have James, you have Robert, and you have me on this call. All of us were serving life without parole. And we would continue to be serving life without parole if you did not have a woman come into office with a moral compass and the fortitude to look at the system and say, listen, we do not always get it right. We have to look at things with the eye of justice and do what we can to get it right. And I'll stop at that. Like, I'm not done, but I'll stop at that.
Sean, thank you. And it's a good transition to Rachel. And I want to thank you and James and Robert. And Rachel, I'd like you to, if you don't mind, take the last word in this extraordinary panel discussion with individuals who were wrongly convicted.
It's very humbling to be here. It makes me recognize the fights that I have are worth it. Right. And I also want to really commend Jeffrey's family, the Boyajians, who I did speak with personally, Mr. Watson, when we made the decision and paid them the respect of telling them why I was going to do what I did. And the grace and compassion that family has exhibited is, I mean, just all of it in this call, my heart is full. I know there is a lot of hurt and trauma, and Mr. Foxworth, I hear you, but just to see the decency and compassion in people and the grace and dignity in these men that have been literally decades robbed of their lives, to Mr. Watson, to see your son, how wonderfully he turned out or is as a man right now, and to hear him speak is just wonderful for me. I want to just share one thing, that I believe everything is connected. And I recently took another leap of faith and filed, I've only signed 2 things, even though I'm a lawyer and I have a bar license. I don't try cases as the DA. I set policy, and I run an office of 350 people, and I'm trying to be a change agent and move the system forward in a way that's more fair, equitable, and just. I've signed 2 things in my penmanship, the Sean Ellis pleading and the Robinson pleading. And the Robinson pleading is the position that this office took. It's the only DA's office in the United States of America that has said that in first-degree murder cases with a defendant that is between the age of 18 and 21 years old, that they need an individualized sentencing, that they have to be found irretrievably depraved. It is something that the state of Washington has done. They have a very progressive Supreme Judicial Court like ours, but over the objection of the DA in the state of Washington, the Supreme Judicial Court made this decision and has this second step for the 3 years after you turn 18. I said on my own, I've asked our Supreme Judicial Court to do that. I signed that plea. I'll be honest, I'm sorry, fighting internally with my staff about why I believed we needed to do this. I noticed one of the cases we cited about the death penalty being unconstitutional in Massachusetts, and it's Commonwealth versus Watson. And I looked at my staff and I said, I swear to God, if that Watson is James Watson, and I'm getting goosebumps right now, and of course it is, because Newman Flanagan brought it up to the Supreme Judicial Court, Mr. Watson, to have you executed. And our Commonwealth Supreme Judicial Court said, no, Article 26 of our Constitution for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts finds the death penalty unconstitutional. Not our legislature, our state highest court. And I wrote the following words in the Robinson pleading myself in a footnote, and I would like to end with this. I said, it is worth noting that Mr. Watson, the defendant in the cited case, which held the death penalty unconstitutional, was recently released from prison after the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office assented to a motion for a new trial because his conviction was achieved in part upon the basis of hypnotized testimony. His co-defendant, Mr. Frederick Clay, had been exonerated and released by a previous Suffolk County District Attorney. Mr. Watson would have been executed, but for the decision of the Supreme Judicial Court and their expansive interpretation of Article 26 for a charge that was ultimately null prost. This is but one example of the critical eye that should be placed on convictions and the power of the constitutional mandates of Article 26. Everything we do is connected. When I was able to stare at my staff and say, this man that we just fought to release, that a judge said, yes, we agree with you, Commonwealth, he would have been killed, but for somebody standing up and arguing, some defense attorney saying, my God, what are we doing? And we need more people and braver people to stand up and do that.
Folks, let's just sit with that thought for a moment. It's an appropriate moment to transition to Radha and the again, the reasons why, as part of that village that Rachel's talking about, and Sean and James and Robert, it's part of that village that keeps people alive. Those people who've been wrongly convicted, those people whose lives have been ruined, who've lost time. I want to thank everyone and transition to Radha.
Phillip, thank you so much for hosting this panel and this discussion. It's really hard because, you know, as Robert talked about, there's so much trauma that's involved in these cases. You know, it is not just a celebration of freedom, although that is there, but it's also it is an acknowledgement of all that was lost. It is a continuation of a fight, and it is a reliving of trauma for people who are here because they don't want it to happen to somebody else. I mean, that is why Robert and James and Sean are here, because because they know that their story, their case, in Mr. Watson's case, prevents people from dying, that it gets people out. And I want to just, I think that the most important thing that I can say is thank you for sharing those stories with us, because it is so hard to relive that. And yet you do it, and you do it every time. And you do it so that we can learn, so that we can honor what you've been through as much as we can, and so that we can keep fighting. And it is an inspiration to do that. We have to close out the night, and I know there's so many more things that people want to say and that people want to talk about. And I promise you, this won't be the last time that we get together as a community to talk about this. And so I just want to thank you for participating in the event, for all of you being here, Rachel, for you joining us, for Phillip, for moderating this. I want to say thank you to all the people who came to this conversation. And I want you to stay connected with us so that we can have more of these conversations. And, we can heal each other as a community, both by talking about it, comforting each other, thanking each other, honoring the experience, and by making sure that we don't keep doing this. And that's what we have to do. So, this is a movement. We've got to stay together. This is not one night. This is not a moment. We got to keep going. Okay. So thank you to everyone who is here. You mean a lot to me. You're part of my family. And I'm just really humbled and grateful. So thank you and good night.